for the ANC's policy conference on day 4. We're still talking issues today of economic transformation, and to be presenting on that is Minister Rob Davies. Minister, thank you very much for your time this morning. What are some of the key issues that are expected to take centre stage in your address today?
Well, I think the first point to make is that we moved today in the policy conference into the sectoral discussions, and so there are 2 commissions that are going to be dealing with economic transformation. Those commissions have not yet deliberated, so I can't say anything about the outcomes, but I think that the point of departure and the context is pretty well known, and that is what I think is the challenge that was before our delegates. So the context is that I think we agree with the basic proposition that we need to put our economy onto a path of higher levels of inclusive economic growth. But in order to achieve that, we've got to make some radical changes, both in the structure of the economy, moving it away from its current dependence on mineral commodity exports, which is where colonialism defined our role in the world economy, moving up the value chain, industrializing, diversifying, and at the same time addressing the patterns of ownership, participation, and leadership in the economy, so that we bring in into the productive economy in particular many more of the majority of the population. So I think that's the context, but also that we recognize that right now we have very low levels of economic growth, which is, we've even in a technical recession, but the growth forecasts for this year and the performance last year are telling us the growth rates will be way below the growth of population, which means that on average our people are getting poorer. We also have, I think we recognize a low level of investor and consumer confidence. We've got unresolved shockwaves from the world economy, which is still hitting us in the form of lower commodity prices, gluts of steel, things like that. And our challenge is going to be to look at the policy we've got, examine it in detail, the policy we adopted in Mangaung, identify policy gaps, identify to what extent have we implemented the policy that we decided then, and whether we have implementation challenges and how do we address those, and then to make concrete proposals to populate the concept of achieving radical economic transformation in a way that will give leadership to the society.
Do you think that delegates understand what's at stake here and what the ANC needs to come up with in terms of policy? Because one of the key issues, I think, that led to our economy being in the state that it's in is what some would say is political uncertainty within the South African political sphere.
Well, I think that we've got a combination of external shocks and internal factors. So we've got a new normal in the world economy, which UNCTAD is telling us is characterized by insipid low growth, but also the probable solution to the crisis will be a new technological change called the 4th Industrial Revolution, which will bring about disruptive change. So I think that the external environment also has to be factored in. But yes, we have low levels of confidence. We've got to build, I think, confidence around the decisions that we take. The decisions that we take have got to be capable of telling society, telling investors, telling consumers, as we confront the problems we've got, these are the answers, these are the solutions that we are proposing. And it's got to build the confidence that we need to move further forward. 75% of the economic activity of this country is in the hands of the private sector. And so we can't ignore that.
How do you build on that confidence? I don't want to step too much into, you've not presented yet, but let's talk about other factors. For example, in order to aspire confidence with South Africans, if you look at the ANC as the governing party, and many perhaps would say that perhaps shenanigans that are taking place within the African National Congress do not fare well, even though you look to put good policies in place, but the shenanigans within the African National Congress at this point certainly do not aspire confidence when it comes to ordinary South Africans watching perhaps what policies the ANC would put in place to better their lives.
Well, I do think that we've got some real challenges of governance, if I can put it that way, not just in the government itself, but also in the state-owned companies. These are major factors around the credit downgrades. The sovereign downgrade also is followed by downgrades in the ratings of the state-owned companies themselves. And I think that some of the instability and governance challenges there are, for example, impacting negatively on the ability of the state-owned companies to be at the forefront of driving an infrastructure development program, which was actually one of the main reasons why we didn't suffer a recession when peer countries like Brazil and Russia were when the commodity super cycle ended. So I think that we've got to get these issues right. We've got to address and frontally face the challenges. And if things are happening in government and state-owned companies which are not to the benefit of the people of South Africa as a whole, but to the benefit of particular factions, individuals, and it's not something that is in the broad national interest, I believe that that's the challenge we've got to confront. That has been put down quite strongly, for example, in the paper of the Secretary General.
If you look at one of the issues when you talk about, SOEs, just in the paper the other day and information that was circulated, one of the typical examples is one of the issues that we tried to put to the Deputy President regarding SAA. And the money that SAA has now been given and the crisis that the national carrier itself finds itself in. Many are saying, well, you've got these companies, allegations of corruption, allegations of maladministration, but still you have a situation where government freely says, well, there's no money for free education, but you're able to give that kind of money to the national carrier.
Well, I think I'm not well informed about the decisions that led to that, but I think that if SAA was not going to be a going concern, that would have enormous repercussions in the economy of this country and as well as in the transport sector. What we need to do is to work towards ending these kinds of situations where, either government comes in and gives guarantees or bails out state-owned companies because of problems in their own organisation and administration. I'm sure there must be, this must have been given against...
Do you think that's a government blunder because of the situation that we find ourselves in? The economy is not doing well?
I think that we've got domestic challenges, is what I'm saying. I think we've got a combination of domestic challenges and also governance challenges, and we've got an external environment which is not necessarily very conducive. So we've got to find a way of steering through that. And I think that bringing about fundamental change in the structures of the economy, moving further forward, finding answers to these governance weaknesses. This is all part of the overall picture.
Just get your sense on what's been unfolding over the past couple of days. While we have spoken to other senior leadership within the African National Congress about the vote of no confidence in President Jacob Zuma, the ANC essentially saying ANC MPs are on the ticket of the party and not to toe the line would have massive ramifications. What are your thoughts on that, and what some are saying seems to be a threat on those perhaps who would want to vote with their conscience?
Well, I actually don't want to address that question. I think those are questions that we're going to have to...
Will you vote with your conscience?
We're going to have to address those questions in our caucus, and I'd rather reserve my comments on that for those kind of discussions.
But what would you urge MPs to do?
But what I do think that we've got to do is we've got to do what we've all agreed to do, and that is to convene as a matter of urgency the Judicial Commission of Inquiry to look at these allegations of state capture. I think these issues are not going to go away until we confront them frontally. I think it's going to be a festering sore around the ANC and around the country. So I support the call for an early convening of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry. I think there are all kinds of technicalities. I don't think that they cannot be solved so that we can get on and put this behind us and move on.
Thank you very much for your time. We'll be presenting, Rob Davies, Minister will be presenting on economic transformation, and certainly quite a number of issues pertaining to the economy will come up. But of course, sharing his thoughts on some of the issues that are plaguing the African National Congress, in particular state capture, also saying, as the Secretary General did of the ANC just a few days ago, saying that Judicial Commission of Inquiry should be set up as soon as possible, as it continues to be a thorn on the side of the governing party.